The February morning was intensely cold, despite the radiant sunshine. Snow from the previous day's storm still formed drifts along the streets of Chicago, and Aisha stood shivering in her surgical attire outside her Subaru, while 3 ICE agents demanded verification of her right to be in the country where she had been born, received her education, and had dedicated her life to healing. Her pager continued to vibrate. The operating room team was inquiring about her whereabouts. The anesthesiologist was requesting her estimated time of arrival, and the patient's family was growing increasingly anxious with each passing minute. But the agents were unconcerned with any of these circumstances. Their sole focus was an anonymous tip that had led them to an African-American woman dressed in medical scrubs, and they were resolute in confirming her citizenship status, regardless of who might be imperiled by the delay. The body cameras captured every detail. The biting cold, the palpable fear, the brilliant morning sunlight reflecting off the snow-covered asphalt, the sheer absurdity of requesting identification from a doctor attempting to save a child's life. This is how a routine commute to work culminated in an $8.8 million lawsuit that would expose the ease with which federal authority could be misused against citizens whose only perceived offense was not conforming to a particular image of American identity. Before we continue, from where are you viewing this? If this is your initial engagement with our content, please consider subscribing. Stories such as these are vital to share, and your support assists us in bringing more truths to light. Dr. Aisha Williams had always acted with deliberation, a characteristic honed during her surgical residency at Johns Hopkins, where every second was critical, and hesitation could mean the difference between a patient's survival or demise. At 41 years of age, she was one of Chicago Memorial Hospital's most esteemed cardiac surgeons, specializing in pediatric cases that other surgeons deemed excessively risky or intricate. She had performed her inaugural solo heart surgery at 32, had published research that altered protocols for treating congenital defects, and possessed a reputation for undertaking cases that other medical professionals declined. Her parents had been educators in Philadelphia. Both had consistently stressed the importance of education as the key to achieving one's potential. They had made sacrifices to facilitate Aisha's attendance at private schools, had celebrated her admission to Princeton, and had wept with pride at her medical school graduation. Her father had passed away during her residency, but her mother still resided in Philadelphia and maintained a scrapbook filled with every article written about her daughter, every award received, and every life saved. Aisha lived alone in a condominium in Lincoln Park. Her life was meticulously organized around the demands of the hospital and the constant responsibilities of being a surgeon. She had limited time for other pursuits. She was unmarried and had no children of her own, though she often joked that she had hundreds of children if one considered her patients. She ran every morning when she was not on call, ensured her Subaru Outback was maintained with exceptional care, and adhered to a routine that seldom varied. She would awaken at 5 o'clock in the morning, engage in her run, shower, and then drive to the hospital by 6:30 for morning rounds. However, February 14, 2024, was not an ordinary morning. She had been summoned at 6:15 in the evening regarding an emergency case. 12-year-old Marcus Patterson required immediate valve replacement following a sudden deterioration of his congenital defect. The surgery could not be delayed. Each hour that passed increased the peril of cardiac failure. Aisha had curtailed her run, donned her scrubs at home to conserve time at the hospital, gathered her identification badge and keys, and departed into a Chicago winter morning that was exceptionally frigid, even by local standards. Although the sun had already ascended above the horizon, the temperature registered 8 degrees Fahrenheit, with a wind chill well below zero. Nevertheless, the brilliant morning sun caused the snow-laden streets to glisten like precious jewels. The previous day's snowstorm had deposited 6 inches of snow across the city. While the primary thoroughfares had been cleared, secondary streets remained hazardous due to ice beneath the snow. Aisha's exhalations formed visible plumes in the frigid atmosphere as she started her car at 8:15 in the morning, allowing it to warm for several minutes while she meticulously scraped ice from the windows, her eyes squinting against the sunlight that reflected intensely off the fresh snow. She was attired in her surgical scrubs, a burgundy top and trousers from the hospital's cardiac surgery unit, with her winter coat draped over them. Her hospital identification badge was clipped to her scrub top. Her hair was secured in the practical chignon she always wore in the operating room. She presented precisely as she was, a surgeon rushing to save a life. The drive to Chicago Memorial typically took 25 minutes, but accounting for the snow and ice, Aisha allocated 40 minutes for the journey. She was making good progress, navigating with caution through streets where other drivers were struggling for traction. The morning commute was in full swing, with thousands of individuals heading to their workplaces under a clear blue sky. She noticed her fuel gauge indicated nearly empty. She had intended to refuel the previous day, but the snowfall had altered her plans. With the surgery scheduled for 9:30 in the Achelpikhost morning, she had just enough time to stop for gasoline without being late. She pulled into a BP station on West Madison Street at 8:52 in the morning. The bright morning sun, already well above the horizon, cast sharp shadows across the snow-covered parking lot. The station's security cameras recorded her arrival. A Subaru Outback pulling up to Pump 7. A black woman in scrubs exiting the vehicle, her breath visible in the freezing air, her face illuminated by the clear morning light. Aisha swiped her credit card at the pump, began filling her tank, and was checking her phone for updates from the hospital when a black Ford Expedition pulled up behind her vehicle, effectively blocking her departure. 3 individuals emerged wearing heavy tactical jackets emblazoned with the letters ICE in yellow. Lead Agent Christopher Wade approached first, his partners, Angela Martinez and Robert Chin, flanking him. All 3 had their body cameras activated, recording from various vantage points in the bright morning sunlight. "Ma'am, we require your documentation," Wade stated without preamble, offering no greeting or explanation. "Step away from the vehicle." Aisha looked up from her phone, bewildered. The February wind cut through her thin scrub top despite her coat, her hands already growing numb from the cold, despite the brilliant sunshine slightly warming the air. "I am a surgeon. I am on my way to the hospital for an emergency procedure. Can this wait?" "No, it cannot wait," Wade replied, moving closer. Martinez's body camera captured Aisha's face in the clear morning light, her confusion giving way to concern, and then to a hardening of her expression. "Where were you born?" The sheer absurdity of the question, posed at a gas station at 9 o'clock in the morning while she stood in surgical scrubs under a bright winter sun, took a moment to register. "I was born in Philadelphia. I am running late for surgery. A patient is waiting for me. A child is waiting for me. Should federal agents be permitted to detain healthcare professionals en route to emergency procedures? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, as what transpired at this gas station illustrates the potential for enforcement priorities to supersede common sense and basic humanity." "We will require proof of that," Wade stated, his own breath forming visible clouds in the frigid air against the bright morning sky. "Birth certificate, passport, naturalization papers?" "Those are at my residence," Aisha responded, her pager buzzing again. She glanced at it. The message indicating her estimated time of arrival was requested, marked urgent. "I am in scrubs. I am clearly headed to work at a hospital. Please, someone could perish if I am delayed." Chin interjected, his body camera recording from a different angle, the morning sun glinting off his badge. "Ma'am, we have received information suggesting you may not be lawfully present in this country. We need to verify your status." "Information?" Aisha's voice escalated, conveying a mixture of disbelief and indignation. "What information? I am a surgeon at Chicago Memorial. I have been employed there for 12 years. I have my hospital identification right here." She produced her badge from beneath her coat, the laminated card displaying her photograph, her name, and her title, Aisha Williams, MD, Cardiothoracic Surgery. Wade barely glanced at it. "Hospital identification can be forged. We require government-issued documentation verifying citizenship." The gas pump clicked off behind her, the tank full. But Aisha's attention was entirely fixated on the agents who were somehow determining that her citizenship status was of greater importance than the child awaiting surgery. "My driver's license is in my car. My medical license is registered with the state of Illinois." My credentials have been verified by the American Board of Thoracic Surgery. I can provide you with a dozen methods to confirm my identity and my profession, but I must proceed to the hospital immediately." Martinez moved to Aisha's right, positioning herself in a manner that Aisha recognized as tactical containment. She was being encircled, treated as a flight risk. All of this was recorded in sharp detail by the bright morning light. "Ma'am, if you do not cooperate, you will be detained. It is that straightforward." "Detained?" Aisha's voice trembled with stress and the cold. "I am a surgeon. I have a 12-year-old patient in preoperative care awaiting valve replacement. His heart is failing. Every minute I am delayed increases the risk of permanent damage or death. Do you comprehend the implications of your actions?" "We are enforcing federal immigration law," Wade stated, his tone flat and bureaucratic. "Turn around and place your hands on your vehicle." The security camera captured the subsequent events in brilliant morning clarity. Aisha looked between the three agents, the realization dawning that they were serious, that they intended to detain her despite her scrubs, despite her hospital identification, despite the medical emergency she had explained 3 times. Her pager buzzed once more. She retrieved it to check a message from the operating room. "Patient's vital signs declining." "Where are you?" "Please," Aisha implored, her professional demeanor faltering. "Contact the hospital. Contact Chicago Memorial. Ask for Dr. Patterson in cardiothoracic surgery. He will confirm everything, but please let me go. A child is dying." "Ma'am, turn around. Hands on the vehicle. This is your final warning," Wade commanded. Aisha's hands were shaking from the cold and adrenaline as she slowly turned and placed them on her Subaru's frigid hood. The metal was icy, even through her gloves. Her scrubs offered virtually no protection from the wind. Her coat hung open, and the February cold penetrated to her bones, despite the sunlight streaming down. Wade produced handcuffs. Martinez's body camera captured Aisha's profile in the harsh morning light. Tears began to freeze on her cheeks, her breathing rapid, her words escaping in clouds of vapor. "I am a doctor. I am attempting to save a child's life. Please do not do this." But Wade was already pulling her arms behind her back, the handcuffs clicking shut, the metal feeling even colder than the air. Chin's body camera recorded Aisha's pager, falling from her pocket onto the snow-covered ground, the screen still displaying urgent messages from the hospital, everything clearly visible in the daylight. "You are being detained for verification of immigration status," Wade stated, commencing to recite information about her rights in the monotone of someone who had performed this action countless times. "I am an American citizen." Aisha's voice rose to a shout that echoed across the gas station parking lot, drawing the attention of numerous commuters refueling their vehicles during the busy morning rush. "I was born in Philadelphia. I attended Princeton. I completed medical school at Penn. I am a board-certified surgeon, and there is a child on an operating table who requires my services. What part of this do you not comprehend?" Other patrons at the gas station had paused their activities to observe. Several were taking out their phones to record, the bright morning light rendering everything distinct. A man in a pickup truck called out, "Hey, she said she's a doctor, let her go." A woman at the next pump shouted, "This is wrong." But the agents ignored them, escorting Aisha to their expedition in full view of the gathering crowd, guiding her into the back seat despite her protests. Inside the vehicle, separated from the agents by a metallic barrier, Aisha sat with her hands cuffed behind her back, her scrubs already damp from melted snow, her body trembling uncontrollably from cold and shock. Martinez's body camera, recording from the front seat, captured Aisha's face through the barrier in the harsh light flooding the windows. The tears, the disbelief, the desperate concern for a patient she could not reach. "Please," she pleaded again, her voice barely audible over the vehicle's heater. "Call the hospital. A child will die because of this." "We will verify everything at the detention facility," Wade stated from the driver's seat. As they pulled out of the gas station into the mid-morning traffic, Aisha's Subaru remained at Pump 7, its engine still running, the gas cap dangling loosely, her medical bag visible through the window in the bright sunlight. The drive to the ICE detention center took 45 minutes, navigating through morning rush hour traffic, which was further impeded by the previous day's snow. Each minute that elapsed was a minute Marcus Patterson's heart struggled, a minute his cardiac function deteriorated, a minute closer to potential catastrophe. Aisha's mind cycled through the surgical plan she had devised, the associated risks and contingency measures, wondering who they had contacted to replace her and whether whoever stepped in would be aware of Marcus's specific anatomical variations. Upon arrival at the detention center, they processed her like any other detainee. Fingerprints were taken. Her hands that had performed delicate cardiac repairs, that had held beating hearts, that had saved countless lives. Photographs were taken, a mug shot of a surgeon in scrubs. Her hospital ID still clipped to her shirt. Her possessions were inventoried. Her wallet, her phone with its dozens of missed calls from the hospital, her wedding ring that she always removed for surgery. "I need to make a phone call," Aisha stated as they concluded the processing. "I have that right. I need to contact the hospital." "You will receive your call after verification," Wade replied. "After verification?" Aisha's voice was hollow, with exhaustion and stress. "Verification of what?" "My name is Aisha Williams. I was born in Philadelphia on March 15th, 1982. My social security number is 567-89-2341. I am a physician licensed in Illinois. Everything about me is documented, verified, and on record. What precisely are you verifying?" Wade offered no response, but he did enter her information into the system. The confirmation was received within minutes. Aisha Williams, a United States citizen by birth. Social Security number issued in Pennsylvania in 1982. Medical license active and in good standing with the state of Illinois. Hospital privileges verified at Chicago Memorial. No criminal record. No immigration violations, as she was a natural-born citizen who had never left the country except for medical conferences. Wade stared at the screen, his expression shifting from confident to uncertain. Chin, reading over his shoulder, closed his eyes briefly. They had just detained a cardiac surgeon on her way to emergency surgery, handcuffed her in freezing weather, and delayed her for over 2.5 hours based on what was evidently a false tip. At 11:17 in the morning, more than 2.5 hours after she had been stopped at the gas station, Aisha was released. Wade handed back her belongings with a curt apology that lacked sincerity. "Dr. Williams, there appears to have been an error. You are free to go." "An error?" Aisha's voice was quiet but carried more weight than any shout. "I informed you I was a surgeon. I told you I had an emergency. I showed you my hospital ID. I provided you with multiple means to verify my identity. And you handcuffed me, detained me, made me sit in a freezing vehicle for 45 minutes while a child awaited surgery. That is not an error. That was a decision you made." She retrieved her phone with trembling hands and immediately contacted the hospital. "Doctor," Patterson answered on the first ring. "Aisha, where in the world are you? We had to bring in Davidson to perform the valve replacement. He is currently in the operating room." "But how is Marcus?" Aisha interjected. "He experienced a cardiac event approximately 40 minutes ago. We managed to stabilize him, but it was a very close call. What happened to you?" "I was detained by ICE," Aisha stated, the words sounding surreal even as she uttered them. "At a gas station. They believed I was undocumented." There was silence on the other end. Then Patterson's voice, low and furious. "They did what?" "The hospital dispatched a car to retrieve her. By the time Aisha arrived at Chicago Memorial at 12:45 in the afternoon, she had been awake for over 6 hours, detained for 2.5 of those, and was emotionally and physically exhausted. She changed out of her now dry scrubs, which had been soaked with melted snow and sweat, and proceeded directly to the cardiac intensive care unit, where Marcus Patterson was recovering from surgery. The boy was stable, the valve replacement successful, but it had been complicated by the delay. He had suffered cardiac arrest while waiting, requiring emergency interventions that could have been averted had his surgery commenced on time. His parents, seated beside his bed, looked at Aisha with a mixture of relief and bewilderment. "Dr. Williams, we were informed you could not make it," Marcus's mother said. "We were so frightened when they brought in a different doctor." Aisha sat down heavily in a chair, her body finally succumbing to the stress. I was stopped by federal agents. They detained me on my way here. I am so sorry. If only they had listened, I could have been here. She broke down then, the professional composure that had sustained her through medical school, residency, and 15 years of high-pressure surgery finally giving way. The Patterson family looked shocked, unsure how to react to their usually unflappable surgeon crying in their son's ICU room. But Aisha was not just crying about the detention. She was crying because the knowledge that her credentials, her education, her life's work had meant nothing to agents who perceived her skin color and concluded she did not belong. She was crying for a child who had nearly perished due to that assumption, and she was crying because she knew this incident was not concluded. Within a week she had retained attorney Victoria Chin, a civil rights lawyer specializing in cases of federal overreach. The lawsuit they initiated was comprehensive. Dr. Aisha Williams versus United States Immigration and Customs Enforcement, Agent Christopher Wade, Agent Angela Martinez, Agent Robert Chin. The complaint alleged violations of Fourth Amendment rights, false imprisonment, racial profiling, interference with emergency medical care, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. The evidence was overwhelming. The gas station security footage depicted Aisha in scrubs, clearly identifiable as medical personnel in the bright morning light, being detained despite her explanations. The agent's own body cameras recorded her repeatedly stating she was a surgeon with an emergency, displaying her hospital ID and offering multiple means of identity verification. Hospital records documented Marcus Patterson's surgical delay and subsequent cardiac arrest. Cell phone records revealed dozens of calls from Chicago Memorial attempting to reach Aisha during her detention. Most damaging was the anonymous tip that had precipitated the stop. Under discovery, ICE was compelled to produce it. An anonymous caller had reported observing a suspicious, foreign-appearing woman in medical scrubs near the hospital, suggesting she might be using fraudulent credentials. There was no name, no specific evidence, only racial stereotyping upon which federal agents had acted without any prior verification. 16 months following the initial incident, the case proceeded to a judicial hearing. The federal courthouse was brimming with a diverse assembly, including medical professionals, nursing staff, students of medicine, and proponents of civil liberties, who regarded Aisha's situation as a prime illustration of how prejudice could imperil human lives. For 2 full days, Aisha provided her testimony, detailing her academic background, professional journey, and unwavering commitment to preserving life. She recounted the experience of her detainment with meticulous detail. The biting cold, the constricting handcuffs, the blinding morning sunlight that exposed her to the gaze of numerous onlookers, and the profound helplessness of being physically restrained while acutely aware that a child awaited a crucial surgical procedure. She described her arrival at the hospital to the devastating news that Marcus had suffered a critical episode, realizing that the delay caused by her detention had brought him perilously close to death. "My aspiration was to become a surgeon to save lives," she conveyed to the jury, her voice faltering with emotion. "That has been my sole ambition. Yet federal agents prioritized confirming my residency status over the existence of a child. They possessed my hospital identification. They were offered a verification route through the hospital. They found me standing before them in my surgical attire at 9 o'clock in the morning, under a brilliant winter sky, clearly en route to my professional duties, with multiple individuals present as witnesses. None of this seemed to register because I did not fit their preconceived notion of an American." Marcus Patterson's parents recounted the sheer terror they experienced observing their son's vital signs decline while they anxiously awaited a surgeon who was being held at a roadside service station. Dr. Patterson testified to the subsequent medical complications arising from the delay, outlining the increased risks that Marcus was forced to confront. Hospital administrators provided glowing accounts of Aisha's distinguished professional history, highlighting her reputation as one of the preeminent pediatric cardiac surgeons in the entire region. Experts in constitutional law presented evidence concerning violations of the Fourth Amendment, the absence of sufficient probable cause, and the illegality of the detention. Specialists in medical ethics elaborated on the profound ethical obligation healthcare providers owe to their patients and how the agent's actions actively undermined this fundamental duty in a manner that placed a life in jeopardy. The defense attempted to contend that the agents were adhering to established procedures, acting on a tip they believed to be credible. However, this defense crumbled when confronted with the body camera footage, which vividly depicted Aisha repeatedly explaining her identity and the urgent nature of her situation, only to be disregarded. The jury engaged in deliberation for 7 hours. Upon their return, their verdict was unanimous: guilty on all charges. The awarded damages were intended to address both the infringement of rights and the inherent danger posed. The total sum amounted to $8.8 million. $3.3 million were designated as compensatory damages, covering the false imprisonment, emotional anguish, and the transgression of constitutional liberties. An additional $5.5 million were awarded as punitive damages, a sum calculated to serve as a stark deterrent, signaling that impeding healthcare professionals on their way to critical medical emergencies would incur severe repercussions. Aisha remained composed as the verdict was read. Her mother, who had traveled from Philadelphia, seated beside her, with colleagues from the hospital occupying the rows behind them. When the monetary award was announced, she did not express overt joy. Her thoughts were with Marcus Patterson, contemplating how narrowly he had escaped death, and pondering the potential peril to countless other patients should such discriminatory practices persist. All 3 agents involved were dismissed from their positions and subsequently faced federal prosecution. The Immigration and Customs Enforcement Agency announced significant policy modifications, including a prohibition on detaining healthcare workers in scrubs or possessing medical identification without explicit supervisory authorization. Furthermore, the agency mandated requirements for verifying tips prior to initiating enforcement actions and established accountability measures for delays that jeopardize public safety. Aisha chose to utilize a portion of her settlement to establish a charitable fund dedicated to providing legal support for healthcare professionals experiencing discrimination and to champion medical education initiatives for underprivileged communities. She resumed her practice at Chicago Memorial Hospital, though she now routinely carried multiple forms of identification and maintained direct access to the hospital's legal counsel. The body camera footage became a mandatory component of the curriculum in medical schools and civil rights training programs, serving as a potent reminder that preconceived notions about an individual's identity can supersede rational judgment and jeopardize innocent lives. In Chicago, Dr. Aisha Williams continues her surgical work, saving lives daily, but she never forgets that February morning when her professional attire and credentials held no sway because federal agents perceived her complexion as a cause for suspicion, even under the unyielding glare of daylight, with scores of witnesses present. If you believe that healthcare professionals deserve protection from harassment, that racial profiling poses a significant threat to life, and that the act of saving a child's life should carry more weight than demanding documentation, please subscribe, because Aisha's narrative unequivocally demonstrates that the consequences of prejudice can extend far beyond financial cost, often measured in the faltering heartbeats of children awaiting surgeons who tragically never arrive.